Okay, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to this live Q&A. We are live. Thank you all of you for joining us wherever you are. We're very excited to be here. And today's topic is presentation skills. So we've decided to title this Q&A, Presenting with Confidence. It's something that we all have to do at some point in our professional lives, whether it is presenting at an internal meeting, or at an international conference, whatever it is, we want to do those presentations well. So we're going to be discussing the things that you can do to help you prepare and also to present confidently with whatever material that you have. Now, just a note on this live Q&A, once we've finished our discussion today, this is going to be uploaded to our Write Online content library. So this Q&A is hosted by Write Online, which is our, it's like all of our pooled expertise here at Write into micro-learning videos that you can watch at your own pace and learn how to do all sorts of amazing skills. So if you're interested in that, go to writeonline.co.nz and you can try it out and see if it's for you. But otherwise, enjoy the conversation today. Now, we're joined by two fantastic Write consultants, Angie Collins and Simon Carter. So I'm just going to give them a second to introduce themselves so you know who we're talking to. Angie, tell us a brief little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm the one called Angie, and I've been working in this area of presentation since my trip to the UK on my OE. So, and also here at Write, clearly. And so I've helped many people work on developing their presentations. And I have to say, it's absolutely one of my favourite workshops. My other two favourite, of course, are business writing and advanced reading, but this is definitely one of my favourites. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us, Angie. And Simon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Welcome, everyone. Great to be hearing you and talking to you today. I have been doing I'm a Write. Sorry, let me back up. I am a consultant at Write, and I do mostly training workshops. And I've been making presentations of one stripe or another for at least 30 years. In my previous life, I was a creative director of a design company, and we had to pitch and present over and over and over again. And it's recently been my great pleasure to develop Write's online version of presentation skills. And I've worked with Angie and Thomas to develop that workshop and run it, I think, about a dozen times in the last year.
Lovely. Okay. So my job today is to ask these two fantastic people interesting questions and get all of the wisdom that I can out of them about presenting. But I'm not the only one who can ask questions. You can ask questions from wherever you are as well. You'll notice down the bottom of the bar there is a Q&A section. So if you have a question that you would like to ask any one of our panelists today, you can. So just put that question in there and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as we possibly can in the time that we have. So let's kick into it. The first question I have is I want to just kind of, if you could only give 3 tips to the people who are watching today, what would they be? What are the 3 things that you think you would summarize as the most important things that people should consider when they want to present with confidence? Angie, we'll start with you. What are 3 things you'd suggest?
Confidence is the key word. Probably being in control of your material would definitely be number 1. So demand the time. If you're given not much time, say, I need more, I need to be comfortable. When you're comfortable with what you're saying, then you can ad-lib, you can work around, you can field questions, and you can just relax and enjoy talking with the people. So yeah, definitely take that time would be the number 1. Number 2, try and make it not about you. The audience haven't come because they want to look at you and see you and judge how you behave. They come because they want something. They want to access the information you're providing, or it's going to help them in their work, whatever it is. So it takes the pressure off you. So you can just think about them. You can research them as much as you can, find out what sort of hot topics in their area where they are, and then make your material really relevant and connect with them. So that'll mean they're happy to receive and you're part of the conversation rather than just one way.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, Angie. Simon, your top tips, if you could only give a couple of things and we had to end it there, what would you say?
I think first of all, rehearse. Force yourself to do it. tape yourself doing it and have a look at how you're coming across, listen back to yourself, maybe do it to a friend or a colleague, try and do it live, because you want to get your timings right. And you know what they say, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So,
that's a good one.
take yourself through, force yourself to rehearse and factor in that rehearsal time. That'd be my first big tip, which I've learned from my own painful failures. I think my second tip would be put a lot of thought into your opening, and the great news is that all the energy you put into your opening, it's going to help you structure the whole presentation, and it's also going to give you your close. Because I think our view, and I think Angie would agree with me on this, do speak up, Angie, if you're not sure. You kind of want your close to be sort of 80 to 90% the same as your opening. So if you nail your opening, you've got your structure, you've got your close. Then I think my third tip, and this is a personal sort of mania, is very few words on screen. So the more words you put on screen, the more people are reading your slides, and they literally can't hear you. So you're the magic, you're the special sauce.
Great.
Loads of words they can get any place.
Lovely. I think that we should make a t-shirt on that one. You're the special sauce. Okay, we're going to go straight into a question. We've got, thank you very much, Jessie Smith. We're going to answer your question here. Jessie says, hi there. How do you best deal with stage fright and anxiety? So this is a classic kind of question when it comes to presentation skills about how you deal with nerves or anything like that. So what tips would you give to those people who are watching, and particularly to Jessie, thank you again for your question, about how to deal with nerves? Angie, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, Jessie, I would probably say they're probably never going to go away. They are a feature of presenting. I read a quote once that most people would rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy, which is probably extreme. But it really is to stand up there on your hind legs in front of the crowd, target for everything. It is nervous. It's a matter of controlling them. One expression was get your butterflies flowing in the same direction. So there are things you can do to relax yourself beforehand. There's a little bit you can do while you're in there. But mainly it's just supports and props that help you, like really good notes, so that if you get that, I've suddenly gone blank. It happens to us all, even when we're not presenting. It's take the time, just have a pause. Most people in an audience quite appreciate when there's a little moment of pause. They can digest what they've just heard. They can go off on their own tangents, thoughts, and all sorts of reasons. We can fill in the gaps while there's a pause. You've got plenty of time to, where are my notes? Where was what? And then continue. Or if you've got dry mouth, just take another pause and have a drink and continue. People don't remember pauses. They're actually quite useful. It's a matter of finding out where those nerves might be leaking, where people might see them, get someone else to watch in rehearsal, and it might be something easy enough to adjust. Like if when you're nervous, your shoulders go up to here, which is what used to happen to me. It's just a matter of, are you cold? No, I'm just really nervous. Well, just have a wee reminder just to put your shoulders down, or turn those jittery movements into maybe a big one. Yeah, there are things you can do at both ends.
Lovely. Thank you, Angie. Angie, very practical advice on that one, actually. As soon as you said about the shoulders thing, I was like, oh, mine are up a little bit. I need to bring them down. Simon, have you got any tips here for Jessie about nerves, or anyone else who is watching who nerves are a real big problem and can get in the way of a good presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, to the folks who've asked that question, everybody gets nerves. And as Angie says, you know, if you're not nervous, you shouldn't even be doing it. So, you know, great performers still get nerves before they have to get on stage, as it were. And it comes up an enormous amount of the workshops we run. When we send you a handout in the next couple of days, we're going to list 4 tips and sources for those tips. I want to cover 2 really quickly that I personally found very useful. The first one is that if you look at your hand, and I've cleaned mine specially, if you look at that web of skin there between your thumb and your index finger, if you kind of pinch around in that, it's sometimes called the thumb valley. if you pinch that web of skin, there's kind of a pressure point in there. Some of you may have come across this if you suffer from migraines. You may have been given it as a way to manage migraines. Some people swear it's a hangover cure. I can't vouch for that. But the idea is that if you're feeling overwhelmed by stress in the moment in the presentation, or as you're waiting, you can kind of bring yourself back into yourself by pinching that web of skin. And as I think we chatted about this before the webinar today, and Thomas made the nice point that you're kind of controlling the dosage, if you like. So you may just need a tiny bit or kind of lean into it a little bit. That's the first one. The second one is a very useful idea that if you're feeling stressed by the room, what you can do is actually tune into your peripheral vision. So if you can almost try this now as you're looking at the screen. If you imagine, rather than looking straight ahead, try and focus your attention on the extreme edges of your peripheral vision at the far. What can you see at the far left without looking over there? What can you see at the far right without looking there? And again, it's a physiological trick, and it helps to ease you out of that stress of the moment and give you a moment of pause, kind of break that stress flow. And in the handout, we're going to give you links to a few of these tips. And we're delighted to say that they come from great sources. So there's a terrific doctor at Stanford Medical School, a Dr. Huberman, who has made a kind of career, a part of his career at looking at these kind of physiological ways to manage breathing and stress. So those are my top two. Thank you, Thomas.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you, Jesse, for that question. We're going to continue on the topic of nerves and go to a question from Viv. Thank you very much, Viv, for your question here. Viv says, hi there. Do you have any advice for how to stop yourself from waffling or going off track? I waffle when I'm nervous, and I fill in the space when it's quiet, even when I try hard not to. So that can be a really, really tricky one. Do either of you have something off the top of your head that could help Viv with their question?
Probably rehearsal and really good notes.
Mm-hmm.
And by really good notes, I don't mean a screed of words that you just pick up and you can't see anything and blah, but just keyword prompts. So that when you're in flight, you could just have a look and see keyword prompt. Am I still talking about my keyword prompt? And it might just be enough without having to read a script, but just jog you as you're going.
Mm.
Nothing wrong with a bit of ad-libbing and a bit of spontaneity. And certainly if you've used up all your time, might not be a problem.
I think Angie's tips are great. I think the thing about notes and rehearsal, absolutely. And the other thing about the person who asked the question, forgive me, I haven't got the name top of mind. If you find yourself, you've got a tendency to waffle and fill the silence, practice with a friend not filling the silence. I was given a tip years ago by an almost nauseatingly wealthy business person that if you can actually train yourself to pause before you answer a question and let a pause hang, it actually gives you some control. And you can also train yourself to use those pauses to think a bit. You see politicians doing this a lot. I'm not suggesting you turn into a politician, but try it with a friend. Try and literally time how long can you let that, in a conversation, how long can you let that pause hang? So that's my two penneth on that.
Great advice. Thank you both. Hopefully that was a helpful answer for you, Viv and anyone watching as well. Remember, you can keep those questions coming. Go to the Q&A button down the bottom there. We will chew through as many questions as we possibly can. Let's go on to another question here, which is quite an interesting one. This one is from Suzanne. Suzanne says, I do rehearse, but using detailed notes. Otherwise, I forget things. What are your views on speaking from notes? So this is definitely something that there are certain presentations where I've had to do, and I've wanted to get the wording just right, and I was really worried about it, so I scripted it. What are the benefits or drawbacks about using a script or kind of, like being very prescriptive about what you're going to say? Simon, let's start with you for this one. Have you got any tips for Suzanne on this one?
Yeah, well, I think speaking from my experience and from working with people putting together presentations, I think the you're either a scripter or you're not. And if you're someone who finds the process of writing a script helpful, then that's great. But our advice would be put together your script, but then convert that into keyword notes, and then almost put the script in the drawer somewhere so you can't dig it out. Because what you don't want is, you don't want to sound like you're reading from a script. And Angie, do you have something that you'd build on around that idea of scripts? I know we've chatted about this before, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, if you've rehearsed it and you've got the acting skills and the time to rehearse it, and you can, George Clooney it, then go for it. For the rest of us, what it can do if you start reading is that or even if you're trying to memorize what you've written, your eyes will go up top left as you're trying to visualize the wording. What was it? So you'll get it'll interfere with your eye contact. It can make your voice become kind of stilted, and you can actually set yourself up for lots of because you've decided in advance that I'm going to use the word, we will amalgamate the two organizations. And then when you get, you go, it's because you're trying to do amalgamate. Whereas if you just had a trigger and you might use different words, you might say, we need to combine, or we want to join together. But you can use whatever word comes to mind to fulfill that idea. But a script makes you think, I've got to say that very, very word, so you can become able, you get more trip ups and you're liable to become stilted as you're trying to read it. But if it's what keeps you together and breathing, I would never ban anything. Do what it takes. At the very least, though, I would get a highlighter and highlight those keywords within it, in case it just sucks your eyeballs down to it and you end up reading it and you lose your connection with your audience.
I guess that's the major loss of a script, isn't it? Is we lose that sense of you and your natural kind of spontaneous self. So I suppose there's a certain amount of when it comes to confidence, and you've both emphasized this, the importance of this, as well as rehearsing well, being really familiar with your material, so that when you are in a position to be able to speak, in the gaps or off the cuff around the things that you've pre-planned, you can do so confidently. Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, Suzanne. A fantastic question. Keep the questions coming, people. So we're going to talk now about what it takes to make a presentation engaging and memorable. We've all sat through presentations that have, we've got to the end of them and maybe we've completely forgotten what it was about, or we kind of drifted off a little part of the way through and started thinking about other things. For both of your, from your experience and for those viewers watching wherever they are, what would your top tips be for making a presentation really engaging and memorable? Like, we want people to have left there going, wow, I really remember this stuff, or at least the key points. Simon, something for you.
Thank you. Sorry, just off pause there. So I think the things that people, our experience, and I think my personal experience, is that the thing you remember is some kind of story component. Our brains love stories. And so if you can have a story that encapsulates something about your key message, then that's a great way to do it. So our advice would be, first of all, figure out exactly what your key message is, and distill that down so you've got it in 2 sentences. Get that as tight as you can, and then think, okay, how do I make that memorable? We sometimes use the word how would I stickify it and make it sticky? So I think anything that's human. So can you tell a story? So if you were presenting around traffic problems, you might say, I was reminded of this at the weekend when it took me, what I feel when I was a kid took me 10 minutes, it took me 35 minutes to get across town. Or it could be something, you could use an example, you could quote, there's a great story about Einstein that he A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so you can turn it into a bit of a story, tiny bit of the audience will indulge you on a small amount of a tangent. But Angie, what do you think? What have you got? What thoughts do you have about that kind of memorableness, stickiness?
Absolutely. Story, we're kind of hardwired to remember story. In fact, a bit of a challenge, if you think of a presentation you've seen more than 2 or 3 weeks ago and think, what do I remember from that? I can guarantee it won't be very much. And the bits that they're quite likely to be when the presenter actually said something personal or memorable because it was genuine and real and based on either a story or at the very least concrete. Volume is kind of the enemy of being able to remember anything. If you told me 27 really interesting things in a row, 2 weeks later, I would wonder how many of those are still there. So it's, yeah, narrow it down to what you expect people to remember and then amplify those, make them sticky, make them memorable, with visuals if you need them, analogy, stories, rather than giving me a list of, for my holiday in the North Island, I visited Auckland, went to Hamilton, New Plymouth, and we also popped into Wanganui and Wellington. Gone in a screed. But if you say I visited a number of places in the North Island, including New Plymouth, the gardens in New Plymouth, have you been there recently? All the spring flowers were in bloom, there was yellow, there was riots of pink, and the music echoed through the hills. It was just glorious. Spend that same time just building one of them up. There's a chance that, you know, even a little bit of it might stick, as you say.
Being sticky, very important. What about, both of you have mentioned about, and Simon, one of your points at the start was about it's okay to restate stuff that you have talked about in your introduction, in your conclusion. What do you think the role that repetition takes in kind of making maybe some of your main points memorable? Should people be wary of repeating themselves?
I'm a bit of a fan of repetition. I think that is something that we're kind of conditioned as kids to worry about when we write. So if you think of your experience of writing things, we get anxious as a writer if we're repeating the same words or the same phrases. But in conversation, if you listen to people, they'll often emphasize a point and keep returning to it. And it works well. There's a lot of research that repeating something a few times in a short conversation makes it much more likely that people are going to remember it. It's going to sink in. So yeah, I think it's something that's well worth thinking about. It's almost the kind of the drumbeat, if you like. That's that little thing that you're going to return to, that little ride before you get into that chorus.
Lovely. Anything on that, Angie, or is that you happy with Simon's answer?
That's great. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's talk about structure and how to, let's say you've got lots of different things that you want to say, but not too many things, obviously, just a few things. And we want to get them in the right order. So there's lots of different ways that you could structure a presentation, and they're probably going to have different effects. So do you have some advice for people who are watching this Q&A about how to structure a presentation effectively so that it's going to be memorable, I guess, and engaging? Simon, we'll start with you again.
Thank you. So I think to my mind, there's kind of two kinds of presentations. Either you have one main topic and you're going to have kind of little tributaries, if you like, to that kind of main river, or you have to talk about four quite relatively different things. So I think if in the second scenario, when you talk about different things, tell people right up front, look, I'm going to cover 4 topics today, and they're going to be these, and I would number them. And then I'd go into, so first, let me turn to X. And so I do that each time so that you've done a very definite step in your process. People know which topic you're on. If you're talking about, if you have kind of like a main message and then supporting messages, then often a reason why structure is very good. So you might say, I want to talk to you about how we're going to make sure we hit the project deadline. And there are 3 key drivers that are going to help us get there. So let me turn to the first one. So I would think either about, you've got these kind of 4 doors, if you like, if you've got separate topics, and you make sure people know which door you're about to go through, or if they're kind of supporting thoughts, that you make it clear that they're kind of reasons why, if you like.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Angie, something on structure?
Like that bit, Simon, about the different doors. I've got a much more boring word. Put in a transition or signpost where it's clear that you've wrapped up that bit. So to conclude on that, and people can, what? Oh, come back and pay attention again. And then you've got their attention to start again for the new bit. Particularly the beginnings and the endings, the openings and the closings. We remember the first few seconds and the last few seconds. So this is one time when I will actually break all my other rules and say, do rehearse those ones. It's okay to memorize your first couple of sentences and your last couple of sentences for two reasons. When you start speaking, there's a lot going on. And the last thing you want to have to worry about, in addition to can I see over there and where's the clock and heavens, is what you're going to say. So have that pre-programmed and try and make it interesting. It might not be an interesting topic, but you can still find some sort of value in it. You know, I'm going to teach you to sleep so that you'll never wake up tired again. Something that makes people feel optimistic, for example, that they're going to find something out. Self-deprecating humor, great, but maybe not at the very, very first. You want to still leave them with the feeling that this is worth being here. So starting off with, oh, I'm not really prepared for this, or I'm not really accustomed to this kind of thing, or this is going to be a bit boring, sorry about that. It's sort of, oh. So keep it the first few seconds kind of upbeat. The memorizing the last bit is to prevent you doing that waffle thing, prevent you kind of petering out and just slowly running out of steam. And well, that's all I can think of. It's so that you have a, oh, heck, I can see my ending coming up. You deliver it. So that's why you'll never be tired again. And people know when to clap, sort of thing. You know, it bookmarks the ends by memorizing those and working extra hard on trying to make them, yeah, a bit of a bang in them.
Lovely. So start strong and finish strong, and let the middle kind of take care of itself.
No one remembered anyway, so.
Great stuff. Okay, let's talk about, because a common way that people will end a presentation is they'll say, hey, is there any questions? Does anyone want to ask anything? Do either of you have any advice on how do you deal with questions? Sometimes it's common, like I said, for people to do it at the end. Sometimes people will thread them through. It might depend on what you're presenting, but are there any bits of advice from your experience that you would say that would help people get into the common traps? Angie, what would you say about questions?
Do it by design rather than accident, probably. So at least know in advance whether they're going to be coming at you and you're expected to deal with them during, or whether they're coming at the end. It depends on the purpose of your talk. If real purpose is to make people feel connected and involved, then you'll probably run it almost off the questions, because then it feels like we're working on this together. If you've got a lot of information you have to get across, and you know that you'll get sidetracked and jump down some beautiful rabbit hole as it comes up, then you might put them off till the end, so you know that you've got your stuff over first. But trying to know ahead of time, that would be probably the main thing, rather than just be surprised by it when you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Something for you, Simon, about questions?
I think it partly, my experience, it kind of depends on the size of the room, if you like, and how many people are there. If you've got a sort of a manageable, what you feel is a manageable number of people, what I'll often do is to say, please ask questions as I go. I'll either take them there or I'll ask to answer them at the end. There will be, we'll wrap up some questions at the end, but do if things pop into your head, do them as they go. And then when those questions come up, you can either say, look, that's a great one, but I really want to cover that a little bit later on. Would you mind if I hold that, if you hold that thought? Or, and if you use that model, it gives you control. You can either take the question there if it suits your purposes, or you can answer it at the end. And then the two like tiny tips I put there is that you can use a question as a kind of jumping off point to make a point that you want to make. And then the only other thing is to make sure you do remember what that question was. So if you're working with someone and they can track those questions, that's really helpful. Or don't be embarrassed about actually writing down what the question was and who the person was that asked it. Because I have a terrible habit of I get to the end and I can't quite remember it, and then people can feel they've been shortchanged. So those are my two tips.
Lovely. Okay, so it sounds like be in control, because we've all seen those presentations where they've been derailed by questions and they've got completely off topic and then they have to bring it all back. So it sounds like the general theme is be in control and preempt them, plan for them, know how you're going to deal with them ahead of time. Okay.
Yes, and sorry, and tell the room as well. Make sure the room knows.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice one. Okay, well, we're into our last few minutes, everybody. So if you do have any other questions, get them in. We're going to talk now about PowerPoint. I thought it would be useful to talk about this, good old PowerPoint. It has a fantastic place in history and presentations, but it can go really bad. It's one of those things that I think is a fantastic tool for certain things, but we've also seen, those PowerPoint presentations that are very, very hard to get through to the end of. So any bits of advice for those who are watching? How do we use PowerPoint most effectively? Simon, we'll start with you. Oh no, Angie, let's start with you this time.
Oh, I would say don't start there. Don't start doing your presentation by thinking, oh heavens, let's open a PowerPoint. Because that will probably mean it'll be quite text heavy if you're doing your thinking onto the PowerPoint. Think about what your presentation is, what you want to achieve. If there are any parts that you think would be made more memorable or easier to understand with a visual, then go and grab a PowerPoint. But make sure you've got your purpose and your content figured first. If you think visual would be needed, bring one in, but the key is it's supposed to be a visual aid for the audience. So not a place to just dump your notes, but it needs to be visual with the caption. You can also just use the audience's imagination. All you have to say is, imagine the Sydney Opera House. You're in a small boat at the base. Just when the fireworks get released. People can do it themselves. They don't necessarily have you to poke the image at them. But yeah, the main thing would be keep them visual, and only if you need them, they can take over very, very easily.
That's good advice. Thank you, Angie. Okay, something for you, Simon?
Yeah, well, actually, I had something I prepared earlier. Would you like to see it?
Go for it.
So now I think you need to enable the screen sharing there.
Just done it. That's a good presentation tip for everybody. Always enable the screen sharing for all participants.
There we go. So can you see my screen there?
Yes.
Great. So my advice would be you want to have very sparse slides. So what I mean with that is very, very few words on your slides. And the bad news about doing that is you may have to put together a separate handout. So that would be my advice. You're going to want to do the two things, your slides and your handout, but there is a trick, which I'm going to show you quickly, that can minimize the pain. So here's an example of what an unkind person might call that kind of death by PowerPoint thing. So loads of words on the screen. The minute you put up a slide like this, people are going to start reading it. And because of the way our brains work, if I'm using my visual channel to absorb information, I can't hear you. So that's the downside of the very dense slide. And what I would suggest is that what you should show on screen should be perhaps something like. So by the way, the topic here is a developer talking about how they manage site clearances and the fact that they try and relocate existing houses if they can. That's kind of buried in here. And the great news is that they're ahead of target. So if you're ahead of target on relocating houses, you could handle it with something like this. So they happen to have a great picture. It would work just as well without the picture. You could just have the text. So relocations, 23% ahead of target. And then here's the little trick, which is that you can use PowerPoint's notes view to help you get that detailed handout while you're putting the slides together. So here's an example of what you could use as a handout. So we've got the slide and then the text underneath, that's just in the notes view. So what folks see on screen is that, but what they get is their handout has got all that extra detail in there that you might be covering in your voiceover. So that was my very quick thought there on slides and handouts.
Lovely. That's thank you, Simon. That is a picture says 1,000 words. Now, I've also heard the words come out of your mouth that were, no one remembers Barack Obama's PowerPoints. Did you say that?
I did. I have said that. It kind of speaks to what Angie said a moment ago, which is that when you're planning your presentation, don't start with the PowerPoint, because the PowerPoint tricks you into doing PowerPoint slides. And actually, you want to think, as Angie was kind of suggesting, you want to think of, what's my message, what's my structure? That's the place to start, and then figure out what you might want to use or not use, as indeed Barack and Michelle Obama tend not to use PowerPoints.
Lovely. All right, well, we've got time for one last question. So while we're talking about some technological stuff here, we've got one more question that is, in a Zoom situation, how do you encourage people to participate? So this is something that us as trainers, we're dealing with a lot. We deliver online training and sometimes reasonably large groups, and it can be quite tricky to get everyone involved. Do either of you have a quick little tip for people who are running a presentation online or over Zoom to get people involved?
I'll leap in while Angie's thinking of something more intelligent. My first thing is that I think our view, working as trainers, I think it's the same when you're doing a presentation, is to ask people if they can put the camera on. We'd appreciate it because it helps us gauge interest. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing I think around doing a Zoom presentation is to be prepared to call on people. So see if you can set up something that's a little bit interactive through the presentation. So in 10 minutes, I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes around topic X, and I really want to know what your thoughts are on this aspect of it. So if you'd like to start thinking about that, maybe support that in a chat thing you send to people, warn them it's coming. Then when you get to that point, say, Bob, actually call on people. Make it clear at the beginning you will call on people, and it's perfectly okay if people want to pass, but you really want to get to hear people's voices.
Lovely. Anything to add on that one, Angie?
Depends on the size of your group, but talking in front of a large group is quite daunting. So using breakout rooms if possible, with a few people in there. So they're actually speaking to a smaller group, and then say, afterwards we'll get, nominate a spokesperson can summarize afterwards, so that it kind of sets the expectation that, yep, you are going to have to talk, but most of you can get away with it in a small environment where it's not quite so daunting. Or if they're sharing information, I'll use a phrase like, it's okay to dob in a friend. If you see a really, really good example and they don't want to blow their own trumpet, you can, say, look, we have a really good example here, just to get people thinking. But yeah, cameras off is very difficult, trying to keep the cameras on, or even just putting chats into chat, not just instructions, but if you don't want to say it, pop it in chat, and then nominate someone to monitor the chat. Yes. Otherwise, even just 22 I haven't looked at yet.
Returning back to breakout rooms, Angie, I really like doing that because it also gives you a chance to pause as the presenter. So if you put people into breakout rooms, you get to check your notes quickly or whatever you need to do to get yourself up to speed, and then you're ready to go back with everyone. And it also gives participants a break from your voice. So sometimes if you're presenting, you don't want to be talking the whole time. You want to give yourself a break and other people a chance to digest some things. So in terms of participation, I agree with you, Angie, those breakout rooms are a really, really cool tool. Okay, well, that is all the time we have for this presentation. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in from wherever you are. Again, this content is going to be uploaded to our Write Online library. You can check it out at writeonline.co.nz and see if it's for you. Thank you very much, Angie. Thank you very much, Simon, for joining us and sharing your marvelous wisdom with us all. Ka kite, everybody. Stay safe up there, and we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.